Dr. Pang, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Williams. So Dr. Williams and myself will be talking to you guys today about utilizing expanding your network to maximize your educational scholarship. And so the objectives for our session is for you to describe who within your network may be an ally or contributor to complete your scholarly work. Second, to identify who you may add to your network to advance your project. And the third, describe best approaches in working with current or new allies or contributors. So I'm going to start off with this first half to talk about allies and contributors. And this is really focused kind of within your institution and kind of more locally. So the things you want to think about is when you're talking about educational project, and this was touched upon when some of you presented your ESR earlier, is first, who are the learners who are interested in the content you're focused on? Second, who might be stakeholders in the content? Who are recognized experts, leaders locally and nationally on topic? And fourth, who are advisors who can address weaknesses in your skill set in designing, implementing, evaluating, and publishing your project? So we want to use an example that Dr. Williams was actually a part of, and this is a publication with Dr. Sanchez. It's the Taking Care of the Puerto Rican Patient model, LMSA members, but they also thought about upstream. So they thought about like, who else can we teach about this? So pre-medical students, they looked at pre-medical students at Hunter College, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, and also downstream healthcare workers. So they look for faculty that were championing health and health equity for Hispanic populations. And second, they look at stakeholders. So the stakeholders who are actually affected by this module, who has an interest or basically skin in the game in regards to this module. So the Dean for Diversity and Inclusion or the Dean for Medical Education, community members and patients. And then third, looking at experts and leaders. So those are the people who have experience with working with Puerto Rican patients, have expertise, are able to provide basically information towards the module. So looking at Puerto Rican Hispanic faculty and looking at faculty of Puerto Rican Hispanic institution, for example, the University of Puerto Rico School of Medicine. And fourth, in advisors, you want to find people who can basically help you put together this project. And so for this module, it was a curriculum development expert. They sought out advisors with different perspectives, and they also sought out advisors who had meta-portal publishing experience. And so ta-da, there are people that were identified for this project. And as you can see, Dr. Sanchez and Dr. Williams are both on this project as expert leaders and advisors, as well as stakeholders. And so what I wanted you to take this time to take a couple minutes, so we'll take probably about 7 to 10 minutes, is I want to consider your own project. Now, thinking about your ideas, whether it's just like a basic idea or whether you have a fully developed project, if you can expand on the learners, stakeholders, expert leaders, and advisors on your own project, that would be great. So kind of take some time, think about your project ideas, think about who would fall under each of these areas and think about why. And we'll come back together in about 7 minutes and we'll talk about some of those people that you've selected. Okay, how are you doing, everyone? Was that enough time? Okay, I see some head nods. Okay, who would like to share? You can share in the chat or share out loud, either one.
So I think for learners, I'm going to have a broad range, but focus on program directors and department chiefs. Stakeholders are going to be the program directors and department chiefs. Experts and leaders, I think Dr. Sanchez may be able to help me with this. Advisor. So my lead program coach advisor is definitely in that category as well. Dr. Ale Alvarez.
No, that sounds great. And I would say for stakeholders too, think about admin and think about even higher level people who have like skin in the game, because those are the people who have the money. And so that's who you want funding basically the programs you're suggesting and the interventions you're suggesting. No, that's awesome. Any questions? Anybody else that would like to share? This is also a good time to hear kind of feedback from all the co-facilitators and also your peers.
I'll share. This is Joy. So I said my learners would be M2 and M3s and then possible residents. I'm not sure about the stakeholders. I guess maybe just hospital leadership. And then as far as experts and leaders, I said the Carver College of Medicine faculty. And then as far as advisors, I put David Asprey, who runs our Medical Education Council, and Denise Martinez, who's in charge of all of DEI for the hospital. And then as far as MedEd portal people, I said Dr. Williams and Dr. Sanchez.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Joy. I have a question for you though. Why M2s and M3s and not M1s and M4s? What's your thought on that?
Because based on discussions I've already had, they said that this was the group who had room in their schedule for electives. But
Fair.
I'm open to anybody.
No, that's fair. And that's complete. And that's part of it too, is like where you can fit in, especially when the medical students already have such a packed curriculum, is where you can actually fit in and actually have a chance to interact with and work with them.
Can you say more about stakeholders again?
Yeah, sure. So stakeholders are basically, you can think of it, most usually it's going to be more local and mostly within your institution, but basically people who have investment and have basically what I think of it as a skin in the game for your particular project. So for example, for the Puerto Rican module, stakeholders weren't just people at the hospital. It weren't just people looking at like health equity and health outcomes and health quality and quality of delivery of health services, but also the patients themselves are stakeholders in that case too. So when you think about stakeholders, think broadly, don't think just about leadership and don't think just about the people who are interested in outcomes or interested in kind of like numbers. Think about the people it actually affects as well. So patients, I think, is definitely one of those populations that we don't really think about when we think about stakeholders, but those are important people to include.
Could we say like just people in the community, or is that okay?
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, your project was talking about eliminating race because it's a social construct, not biological in education, correct?
Yes.
So yes, I would definitely say, yes, that affects your community, that affects the patients, that affects the people that your learners and your faculty are working with. So completely, I would agree that they are stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
I could share mine. So I did the same program as Valerie. So a similar audience in that it was kind of campus wide across Stanford. So anybody's open to attend. So it could definitely be adapted to multiple levels in terms of audience. But at this point would think that it's geared towards residents at this point throughout the various departments. So those would be the primary learners, but in much the same way that some of these topics are fluid. It could easily be, the faculty and program directors and chairs as learners as well, because I think certainly people don't have as much kind of formal training in some of these topics. Just to give some background, the topic itself is recognizing moral injury and then coming up with tools to combat that. And the workshop is designed with a small didactic portion at the beginning to kind of define moral injury, a few cases kind of relevant to the Stanford community, particularly the vaccine distribution initially that some people may be familiar with, and some of the inequities that arose with that. using that as a case, and then having kind of flipping the room and using or giving the learners the opportunity to come up with their own case, and then kind of teach that back to the workshop instructors. So similar to what we talked about with Valerie, I think the stakeholders are certainly the residents and the people that the project aims to teach, but then also the department. So the leadership, the ancillary staff within a residency department, in terms of, the program coordinators and people in charge of distributing this information and supporting the residents, certainly the program directors and the chairs. And then also, like we talked about, kind of the committees and people that are in charge of kind of making diversity, inclusion, whichever terms you'd like to use, more emphasized within a community. The experts and leaders, through the program, we had people within the Department of Pediatrics who kind of piloted the LEAD program, who are our mentors throughout. So I have a faculty member there. And then I don't know as much about if there's other institutions who have done similar programs, but certainly you could have those as experts and leaders and advisors as well, in terms of kind of helping to shape the program as you kind of adapt it to this. And so I think in some ways, a lot of that, at least for my project, is fluid, in that certain groups of people can fit into multiple categories.
No, thank you, Connor. And that's actually a perfect segue to Dr. Williams' section about kind of how to expand your network nationally and who to look at on the national level.
Thank you. So the second part, we're going to talk about advancing your network and outreach. So we're going to spend a few minutes just thinking about your project. How can you take it from a local level, which most of you are right now, to regionally or nationally? If you're doing something in medicine to nursing, how can you involve other disciplines? How can you now take it from a GME to a UME level, or even to faculty development? And it says journal to book chapter. So we're going to think about your project specifically in your audience, and how can you expand upon that audience or advance it in a different manner. So we'll take about 5 minutes, and I don't have any music to play or crickets chirping. So people can talk, or we can just go through the chat. So I'll give it maybe 2 or 3 minutes. All right, we can start jumping in. Any ideas? I think, Valerie, were you speaking earlier?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought this up, because I hadn't thought about it. But actually, now that you mention it, my home institution, my residency program, had actually reached out to me asking what we're doing at my current institution to increase diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. So this is actually perfect, because it was actually the program director that reached out to me. So I could reach out to her and say, hey, look, now I have a module that could help.
Yeah, so you're doing it right now for you say you're doing it for residents in the mix. So how can you take that onto how could your project become a part of a faculty development module? How could you expand that?
Are there specific steps that need to be taken, are you saying?
You can probably just modify the content for faculty more so because it sounds like right now most of your audience are trainees. But then how could you even take it beyond that, beyond your institution in itself? Think about it.
So I think it's pretty general, actually. So I think it as is can be applied to different institutions, because there's really nothing specific to where I'm currently at that couldn't be applied to any other medical school or residency program. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, are you which is your psychiatry, you said, or?
I'm pediatric.
Pediatric. So
but this was developed with anesthesiologists, emergency medicine. Like, my group was big and diverse. So there's nothing unique to pediatrics in it.
So what you can potentially do is take that and bring it to like a national conference, one of whichever discipline, and you can submit that as an abstract and potentially even look to present it on that level. You can also take what you're doing, because right now you're focusing on physicians. You can look at like your nursing staff, physician assistant staff, dentistry. I'm not sure which other professional schools are affiliated with the institution, but you can take what you're doing and adapt it for like nursing, like how do we diversify nursing? And then just think in terms of expanding it beyond that. Because as you're saying, what you're doing is generalizable to a lot of different spaces, but it's not. Right now, we're focusing more on physicians, but understand that there are other healthcare professionals that could benefit from what you're doing. Anyone else want to think about how they can advance their network and reach?
I'll go next. So I was thinking, so like I mentioned before, my learners were initially M2s and M3s,
Mm-hmm.
but I could advance it to, like you mentioned earlier, residents, and then eventually to faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as a national level, since I'm at a Big Ten university, I could try to reach out to other Big Ten universities who have medical schools affiliated with them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, and who do you think would benefit most from your anti-racism work? You think it's the students, faculty, or GME? Who do you think needs it the most?
Who needs it the most, or who would then do what I actually want them to do? I
Yeah.
think I feel like some faculty are like kind of like, I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but like medical students are more like eager to like make change.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, since they're like the next generation of physicians. But I don't know.
I'll go with faculty.
Okay.
That's where I was heading with it. To your point, we're, older, more stuck in our ways. And I think, younger generations are probably more open to change and more malleable. So think about, again, national organizations presenting your work as an oral at a national organization, potentially adapting your work in other spaces, because again, it's important work that can be utilized across different spaces. Anyone else?
I'm thinking about a project that I'm working on, but I can't use it for this fellowship because of the stage of maturity of our institution. But a colleague and I are working on a gap in the literature with a particular osteopathic treatment technique.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that project is ideal for this sort of writing activity, both with the module for the students that we are in the process of developing, but also we're doing empirical research on it as well. And so we're having to bring in both MDs and DOs, teaching them the technique. So we're moving it out regionally, monitoring the results, the efficacy of the other practitioners' attempts. We're working with our state association to get CEUs for those collaborators. I think it's something that becomes faculty development, it becomes professional development, and it will become, I think, a journal article as well.
Exactly. So that's a perfect example. You took it regionally and nationally, and it becomes a journal article, something that can be utilized across the way. And something that's good about Meded Portal is that what you're putting in Meded Portal gets adapted by other institutions and gets enacted by other institutions. So the next exercise, which is about a couple minutes again, I won't play any elevator music because I thought JP making a face at me. Where is he? He's gone. You're making a face, JP. You're making a face. Is think about your writing fellows. You're starting this fellowship. You have a year. You have your writing fellowship directors. Who among us could be your ally or contributor? And in terms of like looking at the published literature on your projects, where are these people located? So again, I'll give it a couple minutes to just kind of think on that. And have you looked at literature from other disciplines? Like, are you looking only in your own discipline or are you looking across the board? No elevator music, but I'll take a couple of minutes on that one also. Just think about it. All right, so we're opening it up. Anyone, think about who among here can be your ally or contributors. Any takers? Oh, my alarm just went off. There we go. 3 minutes.
In my search, one of the papers was from Dr. Sanchez.
Which paper did you see specifically?
It's actually the one that he shared with the group about Native Americans, social and structural determinants of urban American Indian and Alaska Native health.
So you've identified him as an ally, and how about a contributor? JP, you're gonna be a very busy man the next year, it looks like. Anyone else? Who amongst the group here that you've heard can be potentially an ally or contributor? And where are the people that are in your published literature? So something I'll tell you normally, if you want to do outreach, if you're interested in a topic and you see an article by someone and you see that person at a national conference, it's okay to go up to that person and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I've read a lot of your work. When I did my master's in health profession education. There's another gastroenterologist who's someone that's very well published in the medical education literature. And I saw her speaking at one of our national conferences, and I went up to her and I just introduced myself. I said, "Hi, my name is Renee. I've come across your name in all these different papers. Would love to just be in contact with you going forward." And that's how you also form a mentorship relationship. And interestingly enough, a year or two later, both of us were on the board of our national organization together. And we've now worked together in many other safe spaces. So it's important that it's okay for you to go up, and something I tell people is it's okay to just ask and say to someone, "Hey, we're working on this project. Is this something that could be featured in your organization? Would you be interested in this kind of workshop?" It's okay to just walk up to someone and introduce yourself if you've seen their names in different papers that you're writing. And I realize that sometimes we don't do that, specifically as women or those who are underrepresented in medicine. We don't really advocate for ourselves a lot. And what I've noticed now, being a faculty member on the other side of being someone who's involved in my fields and national organizations, people always come and ask you for things, and they're always men. That's the interesting part of it. They ask you to give talks. They ask you to put your projects forward. They ask you to collaborate. So it's okay for you to move yourself forward and think in those spaces. If you're working on something that's like an anti-racism curriculum, I think it's great. It's okay to approach someone at AAMC and say, "Hey, I'm working on this curriculum. Do you think it's something that AAMC might be interested in?" They could tell you no. The most anyone's ever going to say to you is, "No, I don't want to hear it." It's okay to reach out to someone and say, "Hey, can we talk about the work you're doing around this? Because I'm interested in it." Recently, something I did is I reached out to the AAMC's, I think, VP for Diversity and Inclusion, because I just got a new role as a DEI associate chair. And in the conversation, I just said, "Hey, can I meet with you and talk about what ACGME is doing around this issue?" And we had a good meeting. And the context of that meeting, it came out that they might be looking into some sort of simulation. And I'm like, okay, I do that stuff. That's something I do. But it's also okay to just meet with people and to have them know your name and face and what you're doing. And you can take the work that you're doing locally and you can expand on that. It might not go anywhere. The meeting I had with the ACGME rep might not go anywhere. But the fact is, you reach out and you put yourself in spaces so people know your name, because you never know what might come back around. Specifically with my mentor, who's now in GI, as I said, 2 years later, we're on a board together, but we had some familiarity with each other, and she does a lot of work in med ed. Anyone else? I'm going to pick on someone if no one else speaks, or someone who hasn't spoken yet. I'm looking at someone who has a PhD at the right name.
You're talking about me?
Yes.
Yeah, so looking into the example that Dr. Medina showed, I think that he could be a good contributor or ally for my project. It has some similarities, and I think that will be a great having that feedback or contribution.
Yes, exactly. And somewhere here, like Dr. Abali works at MedEd Portal. She's on the editorial board, correct? Emily, am I wrong? She is. She's on the editorial board. So there's another potential person to utilize as an ally. She has that expertise. She's been on the editorial board for MedEd Portal. So someone who has a lot of knowledge and expertise, because MedEd Portal has specific metrics that they look around in terms of what they do. And a bunch of us here, Dr. Sanchez, have published in MedEd Portal. So you utilize those things because they're here for you to use in the next year. And Dr. Abali happens to be really nice on top of it too. So how do you leverage your buy-in? So one thing I'll tell you, for any work that you want to do, and the one thing I've learned in my own career is you have to have buy-in from your leadership. You just have to. There's just no way. You cannot put forward any kind of programs without your leadership being on board. And they're the ones that are going to help you move things forward. So for example, you have to look at value-based alignment. So there are things you have to consider, like personal passion and identity. What's specific to you? What do you feel that's passionate? What are you passionate about? Someone said, I want to increase diversity in academia. That's a passion. You want to do anti-racism trainings. That's a passion. You want to work on LGBTQ issues. That might be a passion. You have an interest in women's health. That might be a passion. And then what are your professional interests? Do those things line up? Like I specifically look like DEI work in increasing representation. In my own field is gastroenterology. We are women and UIMs are underrepresented. So something I do a lot of work around is how do I increase diversity in GI? That's a personal passion. That's also a professional interest of mine. So those are things that you have to really put together. Now, how do you use your community and how do you network within those community for those specific needs or disparities? And then does it align with your institutional mission, vision, or objectives? If it doesn't align with your institutional mission or objectives, then it's just not going to work. And so it's really important that you have to leverage these things and get buy-in from the leadership. So you want to make sure you allocate your efforts. And how do you address a defined void or gap? Any thoughts? You're all doing very important work. But the question I have for you is your leadership on board with the work that you're doing? Because if they're not, it's going to cause a huge roadblock. Any comments, questions?
I have a comment.
Mhm.
So my leadership. So I'm in the Department of Pediatrics, and my leadership is on board with what I'm doing. We just named a new chair.
Mhm.
He's in charge of neurology right now. But the same day he was named chair, the announcement that went out, I emailed him. I said, "Congratulations!" And I said, "Let's meet to talk about DEI." And then the next day, he asked me to meet with him to discuss the initiatives I have in mind. And so I'm the vice chair of DEI for PEDS. So I thought that was great that immediately he put a meeting on the books with me. So I consider him an ally.
Excellent. Now, is he willing to put money and resources behind your project?
Yes, we talked about that too, but I'll also utilize the DEI office at the Carver College of Medicine, who's also offered me money for projects that I'm doing.
Good, excellent. That's great. That is great. Anyone else? Because I think a lot of times, right now we're in a space where everyone wants to get involved in DEI work, and a lot of leadership is putting forth, they're naming people, they're assigning people. But the question becomes, once we're past this time where everyone's very aware, how much are they really going to put into this work moving forward? So here's an example to support some buy-in. Personally, Hispanics are the largest non-white community in the United States, and Puerto Ricans are the second largest cohort of Hispanics. Puerto Ricans are twice as likely to die from diabetes as whites. That might be a personal thing that I am passionate about health in the Latinx community. Professionally, the Latino Medical Student Association unites and empowers medical students through service, mentorship, and education to advocate for health in the Latino community. So you have a personal interest, you can also work through the LMSA or the NHMA. Institutionally, if you're looking at a medical school, LCME Accreditation Standard 3, Academic and Learning Environments, a medical school ensures that its medical education program occurs in professional, respectful, and intellectually stimulating academic and clinical environments, recognize the benefits of diversity, and promote students' attainment for competencies of future physicians. If you want to have your institutional buy-in and it's not 100% there, go back to the rules and regulations. LCME says that this has to come into play. Specifically speaking. And if you're looking at GME programs, ACA-GME requirements, at least in medicine, there's a specific requirement around incorporating the social determinants of health within the curriculum. It states that that's in there. So if someone's giving you pushback on your program or learning about diversity, it is in the ACGME requirements. At least it is from internal medicine and for GI. I don't know about the ACGME requirements for other fields, but read through those requirements because I guarantee you there's something in there about diversity and inclusion. And if your institution is kind of giving you pushback, you can say, listen, this is something you have to do because here it is specifically within the requirements. And within the LCME for medical schools, that's where it comes into play. So that's how you kind of can leverage and get buy-in from your stakeholders, because your stakeholders want to know what's of value, what's a metric. For them, I need to accommodate or I need to go by the LCME accreditation standards. And for ACGME, I have to fulfill those requirements. So those are things that you can also utilize. So sometimes when I'm putting forward DEI work, I could say, hey, listen, here's an example. Under PSQI, which is personal safety, patient safety quality improvement, DEI stuff or SDOH comes into place. If you look at the requirements, I'm saying we're going to have residents work on DEI work, but understand from an ACGME perspective, it also falls on the quality improvement. So we're fulfilling the quality improvement SDOH by having the residents work on health equity. So those are ways that you can look and leverage it, because say it's a part of, patient safety quality improvement is a huge thing now. We all know institutions have to, there's a clear initiatives, things like that from ACGME. And under that umbrella is where you'll find information about where DEI falls within your training program, just FYI. And in the community, Puerto Ricans are twice as likely to die from diabetes as well. So this is how you now integrate the community into this space. So looking at your project, and we kind of did this already, think about your personal, professional, institutional, community buy-ins. And I think I'm supposed to give you how many minutes on this side? I'm looking at my notes. I think a couple minutes. So I'll give you a minute or two to think about this, and I'm going to ask. JP, any comments on this? Dr. Sanchez, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was listening. So I think this is just really thinking about all the people that could potentially help you with designing your module. Like Joyce mentioned, it's not only the people directly you're teaching, but then hopefully the people that you're teaching, how they're affecting others. And she commented on patients. Often patients are the end goal. So we teach our medical students, our residents, to behave in a certain way or to gain certain knowledge and skills so they can do better by each other or by their patients. So there's the primary audience, and then there's everyone else who benefits from those primary learners. And as you think about that, think about all the different people that win because of the work you're doing. As mentioned by Renee and many of you, the people that invested in you to be in this program, they are some of the people you want to connect with. So your center leaders. You want to think about your dean of education so that you could have a better chance of integrating it as a standing curriculum in the medical school, or your dean of GME if you're working along residents and fellows. So this is just thinking about everyone that you could potentially collaborate with to have a better outcome or product.
And I think the personal buying aspect is obviously very evident. You have your own personal buying, but think about professional institution and community wide. So again, giving you a couple more seconds without the elevator music. And I'm going to take a Nexium because I have heartburn from the coffee I've been drinking while I give you guys some time to do what you need to do. Hence why I'm off the camera. Oh, someone said the elevator music is great. Thank you. JP made a face. I had to take it off. All right. So I've taken my Nexium. Hopefully my indigestion disappears, and I shouldn't drink this much coffee ever, but I can't seem to give it up. Any questions about, or any comments about who could be your professional buy-in? How can you get buy-in from your professional organizations or institution? I think Dr. Long gave a really great example from her project earlier, how she got buy-in from other people. Any other, thinking about your own personal projects, any questions or comments?
Regarding my project, I mentioned the Medical Education Council because I want to, in addition to publishing this on Meded portal, I want to actually do it at Iowa. And so I spoke with them in advance, and they said they were on board. And so, yeah.
Good. Everything that you guys are working on would fall somewhere within also the regulation, institutionally speaking. Look at your institution's missions and goals. Does it have the word diversity in there? If it doesn't, should it have the word diversity in there? You might want to make a change in that way. But again, looking at LCME or ACGME, those are things that you can utilize. But then at faculty levels, there's nothing specifically requiring around it, but you can think about faculty development around that too, and the communities that you serve. Those are very, very important things to think about or consider. How are we doing on time? I think we're good. Next step. So important to understand that you're not alone. You can find like-minded peers, and it's okay for you to reach out across institutions and to find mentorship across institutions. So I'll give you an example. I had a young resident reach out to me from Florida because she felt like she wasn't getting support there. She wanted to apply to GI. And the last year, her and we worked together on projects, and she made herself a competitive candidate. So I tell people, if you can't find what you're looking for within your own institution, it's okay to reach across and find people who are like-minded and say, hey, let's work on a project across institutions and do something here and do something there. Understand that. You need to identify the potential barriers and partners, identify potential partners across the country in similar work and outside of your discipline. Again, the young lady who reached out to me, she not only worked with GI doctors, she's also worked with surgeons. She reached out to a surgeon in her own institution, a GI surgeon, and she also reached out to me outside. So she reached outside of her own department, and she reached outside of her institution. And leverage buy-in through personal connectedness, institutional missions, and accreditation standards and community needs. Accreditation standards, not something you necessarily want to pull out your back pocket, but you can utilize that to get your leadership involved, because our leadership might not be as interconnected with the community as they need to be or understand what needs to happen. Someone just says, Joy, I think your institution is under HLC diversity is required, HLC accreditation guidelines. There you go. Yes. So there you go. So think about those, know your rules and regulations, utilize them if necessary. And that could be tied into the work that you're doing to get your institutional buy-in. I think that is it. I don't know if we're going to go to a break. Stop share. Thank you. Any questions or comments? I'll also take donations, and that's a joke. That's an absolute joke. Mhm.
So any questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Pang and Dr. Williams. This is a really important topic. So how do you all feel about gaining the support of colleagues, members at your institution? Are you concerned about those relationships? Do you think you're supported? Maybe we can hear from everyone on whether they feel like they're supported or if they're afraid of running into some barriers.
In my case, I feel supported as our college is going through a full accreditation process. This is a topic that is very relevant, and I do have the support of the Associate Dean for Academic and Students Affairs. We are in the process of looking more for grants to being able to fully accomplish the project itself.
Great, thank you, Alhelvis. I'm just going to pick on a couple of people. Rachel, how do you feel in terms of support? Are you worried about communications with anyone in particular? You don't have to say their name, just like in terms of your project.
Well, I'd like to actually work on an existing project. I emailed you. But I'm really lucky that I'm pretty well supported in my institution. My department chair is very much on board with me growing professionally and also helping the institution. Being chair of the admissions committee, I have really good relationships with a lot of people in medical education leadership. In fact, one of my mentors just got named interim dean of our medical school. So I kind of have help from the bottom up or top down. So I'm really lucky.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Dr. Callahan, any points or tips? You've done this work for a very long time.
I'm really pleased by the presentations that have gone on today. This last one has actually been an immediate help for me on a project that I'm struggling getting enough people involved in. It's basically an anti-racist endeavor, and trying to find faculty available within the institution locally has proven a little bit of a challenge because everybody is so slammed with the work they're doing. But the nice thing is that you really pointed out that it doesn't need to be just local. And I've come up with a way of expanding the target group and expanding the collaborators across institutions. And who do I make the check out to, Renee?
BingGap. Everything goes back to BingGap. Joyce, any further comments? Dr. Pang, sorry.
No, it's all good, Dr. Williams. I'm still a trainee, so I
still Dr. Pang.
2 more years because I decided to extend my training. But no, I was going to say everything you said was absolutely on point and relevant. I would say the only thing I think that to emphasize is go into your professional organizations as well. I know I've had a lot of support by connecting with other residents and fellows through the American College of Surgeons. So those professional organizations can be a great networking opportunity for this work as well.
Could I add one point too? Because people are not necessarily aware what it takes to be a member of the group on diversity and inclusion. In the past, membership was determined, each dean got to appoint one member of the official people who were members of the group on diversity and inclusion. But what all of you should be aware of is that by writing to Juan Amador at AAMC, you can become a member of the listserv, which is this incredible forum of people who are committed to diversity and inclusion across the country. If you do that and ask to be added to the listserv, you become an unofficial member of the group on diversity and inclusion. You can use that as a wonderful forum for getting ideas, bouncing ideas around, and you'll get a lot of ideas out from other people. So I would encourage you to do that, even though there only may be one appointed person from the dean. You can certainly find a tremendous group of allies to work with across the country.
True. Excellent point. Excellent point.
You also may want to email Dr. Williams, because she's got all the ends on that now as a new member of the steering committee.
Yes.
Well, excellent. So thank you again, Dr. Pang and Dr. Williams, for an excellent presentation. We're going to take a 20-minute break. The next session starts at the half hour, and that session will be building an effective co-authorship team. So enjoy the break, and we'll see you back shortly.